Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first 50 over 50 virtual community event. We're so glad you're all here with us this morning. I'm Julie Cohen. I'm the Engagement and Advancement Director at Pollen Midwest. We are beyond thrilled and proud to have been working with AARP Minnesota over the last 5 years, helping to change the conversation around aging in Minnesota. For those of you who aren't as familiar with Pollen, we are a media arts organization that harnesses the power of narrative change to build towards a more free and just and loving society. We're committed to shaping a narrative and sharing stories that help us imagine a different future and to examine the steps towards that future. These are stories that share a spectrum of voices and that help us move away from false, dominant, harmful narratives and move us towards narratives that repair harm. And that work starts with an acknowledgement of the stolen land that non-Native people occupy. There are 11 Anishinaabe and Dakota nations in the state of Minnesota. Pollen is based in Minneapolis, the homeland of the Dakota people. Indigenous people have been here for millennia, are still here, and continue to thrive despite centuries of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced removal, broken treaties, and ongoing colonialism and oppression. Their contributions to society and culture are innumerable and continue to touch every facet of our daily lives. It is on all of us to engage with and amplify the work of local and Native-led organizations and actions that benefit Native communities. To learn about the Native peoples and tribes who are part of our communities and to support Native-owned businesses like those along the American Indian Corridor here in Minneapolis. We can also hire Native artists and continue to demand accurate Indigenous history in our Minnesota schools. Just a few housekeeping notes that I wanted to share. We do have live transcript available. Folks can find that at the bottom of their Zoom screen. You'll see live transcript. You can just click that button and enable it for yourselves. Please also use the chat to say hello to folks and participate in the conversation. Definitely encourage folks to keep their video on so we can all see each other and be in community together. You can also rename yourself. Again, at the bottom, you'll see participants, and you can add your pronouns or what organization you're from or where you're calling in from, just to give people a little bit more information about yourself. We are going to begin this morning with a few remarks from AARP Minnesota's new state director, Kathy Mcclear, followed by a special tribute to one of our 50 over 50 honorees. From there, we are going to take a few minutes for everyone to say hello to one another in breakout rooms. And then we will move into our panel conversation. So our official program is going to wrap as close to 12:45 as we can get it. But for those who would like to continue the conversation, we will be hosting small group conversations in breakout rooms until 1 p.m. We may extend that to 1:15 if people are really actively engaged in the conversation. So definitely encourage folks to stick around for that. So I'm going to get us started by introducing Kathy Mcclear. Kathy brings 15 years of AARP experience to her new role as the AARP Minnesota State Director, along with extensive experience in advocacy communication, community outreach, and volunteer engagement. Kathy first served as the Associate State Director for Communications in the AARP South Dakota State Office, and she recently served as the Senior Advisor for the Central Region, providing strategic and tactical support for 9 states. Big job. So please join me in welcoming Kathy.
Thank you, Julie, so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for this really fantastic event. Julie did a great job of telling everyone kind of who I am and where I came from, but I do have very strong ties to Minnesota. So I'm currently in South Dakota. I've been in this new role for about 5 weeks, but really thrilled to be back working with the fantastic staff and volunteers at AARP Minnesota. I went to the University of Minnesota I came back and I worked at WCCO TV for a number of years, and now I have the pleasure of having two Gopher girls who attend the University of Minnesota as well. And so when this opportunity came up to be the new state director for AARP Minnesota, I was really thrilled and excited by the opportunity to serve those 50 and older within the state of Minnesota. So pleasure to be here. I had the pleasure of being at an in-person 50 over 50 event in 2019. And it was such a fantastic event. This whole 50 over 50 program has just been tremendously inspirational. And I'm really thrilled to be here as part of this event today. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us. Just as a reminder, AARP is a nonpartisan, nonprofit membership organization for those 50 and older. And we work to empower individuals to live as they choose as they age. And we do serve 630,000 members right here in Minnesota. But what we do for all. And a very important piece of our work it's really near and dear to all of our hearts, is our motto. And it's from our founder, Ethel Percy Andrus. And that is to serve, not to be served, which is why we are all here today. So in 2016, AARP Minnesota and Pollen launched the 50 over 50 program, really as a way to celebrate the hope and the resilience and the contributions of those over the age of 50 who worked tirelessly to make Minnesota better for all of us. And since then, we have honored 250 truly amazing change makers from communities all across the state, really as a way to break down some of those barriers and outdated beliefs about aging so that we can all build better connected communities. Now, we know that ageism is real, and Minnesotans struggle because of those hurtful stereotypes about aging. But these 250 Minnesotans are proof that our contributions are not diminished by how old we are. Our 50-50 over 50 honorees don't adhere to the belief that you have to be young to blaze trails or shake things up. And instead, they demonstrate on a daily basis that age can be an advantage when it comes to improving the lives of others and our communities. From an LGBTQ activist to a Native healer, from a neighborhood crime stopper to spiritual leaders, Minnesotans 50 plus are truly, truly making a difference. And for those of you who have participated in our past 50 over 50 celebrations, you know that this particular platform is just a little bit different than maybe what you've experienced. And we sincerely hope to be able to hold in-person events again when it is safe to do so. So for now, we are celebrating some of our past awardees in these smaller virtual ceremonies, such as this, really as a way to connect with community and one another, and to change the conversation on aging. Now, today we're going to hear from a few of our past honorees who have really mastered the art of aging well through their volunteer efforts, and to connect with people from all across Minnesota who share a passion for community. Now, before we get to those inspirational stories, I'd like to share just a little bit about volunteering and how it relates to aging well. So as I said, I'm returning to Minnesota after a bit of a hiatus, 20 years to be exact. But Minnesota Nice isn't just a cute saying, it really is a way of life. And in 2019, 41% of us gave back through volunteering. Volunteering helps us build connections to counter isolation and loneliness. It helps us learn new things and become open to new experiences and gain new perspectives. And we also create that really cohesive community through volunteering. Now, volunteering can be formal or informal, and in many cases, it is simply a neighbor helping a neighbor. And we can all give of our time, ourselves, our connections, our relationships, our expertise, or even just our experiences. And while not all people see themselves necessarily as a community leader, they do know when to jump in and help out, and to identify a community need and just do something about it. And sometimes even career changes can be inspired by a passion for volunteering. So with that, I really, truly want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope that you are as inspired by the stories as I have been, that you learned something new, and that you are moved in some small way to give back to your own communities. So with that, I will turn it back to Julie to continue with our program.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate that. So we're going to keep things moving. We typically start our events with an artistic performance of some kind. For those of you who have been to our 50 over 50 celebrations, We've had poetry readings and musical guests with us, but today we're going to do something a little bit different to pay tribute to Michael Matthew Ferrell, the executive and artistic director and founder of Alive Kickin. And Michael was part of our inaugural 50 over 50 list and was honored as a 2016 disruptor. Michael passed away earlier this summer, which was an absolutely devastating loss to the community of rockin' seniors that Michael helped to create at Alive Kickin. So we have invited Jason Hansen, the musical associate director and arranger of Alive Kickin, to help us pay tribute to Michael this morning. Jason, welcome.
Thanks, Julie, and thank you to AARP Minnesota and Pollen just for having us and letting me talk a little bit about Michael. So I'm the music director and associate director of Alive Kickin, and yeah, about 12 years ago, Michael started Alive Kickin as a way to break apart senior stereotypes. And we do that through contemporary song and rock music and stories. And it's a senior services arts organization. We put on these gigantic performances, but then we also take our programming into senior facilities and work with the residents. And as Julie mentioned, in 2016, Michael was one of the 50 over 50 honorees. And in June of this year, he passed away of cancer and left a really big hole in our community and in our Alive Kickin family. And we're honored to be able to carry his gigantic legacy. And one of the things we want to do is be able to share a little bit about Michael and showcase some of what he did in a video you're about to see. And I really hope that as you're watching it, you get a sense of Michael's spirit and his energy that helped form the inspiration that Alive Kickin is today. And yeah, I hope you'll enjoy a look back at what Alive Kickin does and Michael's legacy. So thank you again.
Bear with us one moment, folks. We're going to queue up a tribute video for Michael here.
Hey everybody, how you doing today?
525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear.
So I vividly remember March 2010. I had a couple weeks off and I thought, you know what can I do? How can I give back? And was inspired by another choir that I saw, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can start something like this.
In inches, in miles, in laughter and strife, in 525,600 minutes, how do you measure a year in the life?
World, we need love. This is a great show for this time of year. Everyone's fighting, right? Nobody gets along. La 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 la. I implore you, go out tomorrow. The next day, open up your hearts, open up your minds. Let's just if we all spread this much, that much, this is going to be a better world for all of us, all right?
Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day.
When Catherine is the oldest current member of Alive Kickin. You want to tell them how old you are?
I'm going to be 93 in August.
Wiggle, 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 pose! Listen to the music. Listen to the music. Listen to it. 2, ready, and 1. Yes! And go. Pause, pause.
Average, ordinary, everyday, superhero. Average, ordinary, everyday, superhero. Trying to save the world, but never really sure. I can't hear you. Bang,
guys behind me, my heroes, Alive and Kickin.
We are building community one song at a time. Thank you, Michael.
I hear babies cry.
Alive and Kickin. Alive and Kickin.
For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not.
First time? Should we go over the rules? There are no rules. Zero. Stand up, dance, clap, sing, have a great time.
The record shows I took the blows and did it my
Thank you so much, Jason, for putting together that really beautiful tribute to Michael. I absolutely love his energy, and I'm sure you all are missing it immensely, but I know that all those rockin' seniors and the team at Alive and Kickin' will keep Michael's spirit alive going forward. So thank you so much for being here with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I now feel like we should do like a dance party, but I'll hold that until later. So I'm gonna keep us moving. We're gonna spend a couple of minutes saying hello to one another. I think especially during these continuing times of social isolation, that even in virtual spaces, it's really important that we connect with one another. So we're going to, don't panic everybody, but we're gonna randomly assign you to a breakout room. And it's a really low level ask, I promise. We just want you to say hi to each other. Just introduce yourself, where you're calling in from, maybe your connection to 50 over 50, or how you're shattering stereotypical myths about aging, how you'd like to volunteer in your community. Just have a little fun with it. We'll be in these breakout rooms for about 5 or 6 minutes, just long enough for you all to say hello to one another. And then we'll come back and we'll get started with our panel conversation. So my colleague Tom will take it away now and get everybody into breakout rooms. Have fun. We'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We're just going to give it a second here for folks to rejoin from the breakout sessions. And Kathy Mcclear will introduce today's moderator. Tom, can you just give us a heads up when folks are coming back?
I think everybody should be back. All of the rooms are fully closed.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, well, fantastic. So welcome back, everyone. And I hope you all had a chance to meet someone new, maybe get a little bit of inspiration from your fellow participants. And I think in my breakout room, we might have identified a couple of new AARP Minnesota volunteers. So that's very exciting for us. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you my volunteer partner at AARP Minnesota, Dr. Kate Shafers. Kate serves as the volunteer state president for AARP Minnesota. She is also the executive director of the University of Minnesota Advanced Careers, or UMAC, the UMAC initiative, which is a gap year for experienced professionals as they transition from their career jobs into meaningful post-career lives. Kate also serves on the Leadership Council of Encore Network, is a founding member of the Nexel Corporation, a collaborative, and helped found Shift, which is a community-based organization serving people 50 and older. So Kate, so happy to have you with us for the celebration today.
Kathy, thank you so much. And thank you, Julie and Tom and all the Pollen folks for hosting this today. You know, stories connect us with each other's and as well as with ourselves. And so today we're going to hear the stories of three remarkable members of our community, three people who have made our neighborhoods and our communities stronger by giving of themselves. Each of these people are a 50 over 50 honoree, and in their own way, they're showing us that we each have something to give, to offer to our communities at every age and every life stage. So let me introduce our three guests today. Dr. Rose Chu is a 2016 50 over 50 honoree in our community category. Rose has dedicated her professional life to the tireless pursuit of education equity and excellence for children and youth. Rose has a long history of service through her volunteerism and leadership in the community, including co-founding the Dragon Festival at Lake Phelan, and she's a founding board member of the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. Rose is also a Parks and Recreation Commissioner for the City of Little Canada and serves on the school board of the Roseville area schools. Our second guest is Paula Hart. Paula is a 2017 50 over 50 honoree in the nonprofit category. Paula has served as president and CEO of Volunteers of America, Minnesota, Wisconsin, which is a health and human services organization. She retired from that job in 2019 and now lives in Dallas, Texas, where she's a consultant and community volunteer. Paula currently serves on the board of trustees for Good Shepherd Episcopal School, as the convener of the Council for the Abbey on Lover's Lane, and as chair of the governance committee for the Carleton Alumni Council. She's also a lector at her church and a regular platelet donor. Phil Johnson was honored in 2018 in the community category. Phil brings 50 years of experience forming and leading volunteer organizations in gender equity, education, sports, human rights, youth programs, and senior wellness. Since retiring 7 years ago, Phil volunteers his time to lead the National U.S. Men's Sheds Association and Minnesota Men's Sheds, part of a global movement committed to promoting social connections, hands-on projects, and support opportunities. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for spending some time with us sharing your stories. So I'd like to just start with a general question about what got you started in volunteering. You know, how did you start this process of being a volunteer? Rose, could we start with you?
I knew you were going to do that. No, I'm kidding. Well, I have to say, I've been thinking a lot about this. Instead, sometimes I don't even know that I was a volunteer, because I literally started this when I was very young. And I've always had this sense that if something isn't right, I'm just going to do something. And so it could be as simple as helping a neighbor kids' homework. I remember, this is very vivid memory for me. And I'm a teacher, so I think it all kind of come back to, oh my God, I'm a teacher at heart all my life. And so the idea that I would literally was helping the school who had some refugee kids who didn't understand the alphabets. So I started helping with that. So I didn't call myself volunteer. I did it because I just wanted to support. I wanted others to have the opportunities and the possibilities that I have. And I think as the only child in a Chinese family, I've actually have this sense of justice in me, because it's been very present for me lately, is that I wasn't the child that my mother wanted. She wanted a boy. And so all my life, I'm acutely aware of the fact that I have to fight for my worth. And so helping others to feel worthy is deep in me. That sense of justice is deep in me. So it's been there, seems like forever. It seems like forever that I'm always doing something. Yeah.
So it sounds like it is really who you are, and maybe also just culturally how you were brought up to give back and give of yourself. Mm-hmm. Paula, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Thank you, Kate, and great to be with everybody this morning. Volunteering was really in my DNA and in my family from my youngest memories. I remember my mom volunteering at what was then called the State Hospital in Rochester, Minnesota. My grandmother volunteered into her 80s. One of her volunteer activities was guarding the art at the Red Wing Public Library at 85. We always wondered what would happen if someone tried to grab the Picasso at the Red Wing Public Library. I have the feeling she was probably there to chat with people more than to actually guard the art. And my aunt was Senior Citizen of the Year for Freeborn County one year and was honored at the state fair. And I remember taking a big bunch of helium balloons and how fun for her volunteer, activities. My earliest memory is volunteering at 7 as a brownie. My mom was, I guess, a volunteer with the brownie troop, and she was very into making Santa Clauses out of Clorox bleach bottles. I was not very much into making Santa Clauses out of Clorox bleach bottles, but what I really liked was going to visit a woman who had multiple sclerosis and was at the nursing home down the street. So for me, it was really that giving back. You just get a lot from giving back. And as Dr. Chu said, it's, yes, you're trying to respond to needs around you, but it is also as much for kind of what fills our own heart.
And Paula, what strong role models and people volunteering into the later years and giving back as being part of how you grew up. So Phil, 50 years as a volunteer. I'd love to hear more about how you got started on that path.
Well, like the others as well, it was in my DNA. I come out of a Scandinavian American background and come out of a background of farming and education. And we just did this. It was expected in our family that you contributed to the community. And because we all are part of communities. And I just enjoyed volunteering. It gave me great feedback. And I just enjoyed, well, I think I enjoyed the most is volunteering gave me great stories. So many things happen when you volunteer. You meet so many great people. And frankly, you do good things. And it just loaded me up with stories to tell my children and grandchildren and others who will listen about all the things that are out there in the world and ways that individually we can contribute to the world and the larger community. Also, I come out of a strong matriarchal family, and so I had excellent examples of women throughout my life that struggled as women have for generations, and I learned to be more aware of people and their needs, and having opportunities to help people just increased my self-esteem and made life enjoyable.
So those role models as well, but it also sounds like, you know, you touched on some things that you've gotten out of volunteering. I mean, those stories and just those connections you've made. Could you talk a little bit about what volunteering has offered for you? Because we know that it's good for our communities, but volunteers also really benefit, don't they?
Yes, they do. I've been retired again about 7 years, and frankly, the volunteering I do in a number of organizations really provides me with actually my energy and having things to do outside of my home with my wife. I really enjoy getting up and doing different things, whether it's with my main organization, the Men's Sheds, or it's with other activities like volunteering at our local library, volunteering in our apartment complex, and also in our community of Mound. It just keeps me very busy doing things I actually like to do with people who I enjoy doing it with.
And that is one of the beauties of volunteering, isn't it? Because there's a choice piece of that as well, of just getting engaged with some causes that are important to you and maybe in some roles as well. So Paula, I'd like to turn with you and ask you the same question about what do you feel you get from volunteering?
Sure. Thank you, Kate. Well, you know, one thing is immediate satisfaction from some of the volunteering I do. So giving platelets is very concrete. And a lot of my work over the years, and even much of my volunteering, has been at a board level or a large organizational level. And it's not always a concrete, immediate feedback. But giving platelets, you can't get much more, you know, concrete than that. They take something right out of your body right then. And if you dare to look, you can see it hanging there in that bag. And you can see the pictures on the wall of people like the ones who your platelet donation will help. But on the other end, as you mentioned, I'm a recent transplant to Dallas, and after decades in Minnesota, followed grandchildren here. It wasn't enough to move for a daughter, but once there's grandchildren, that got to be a bigger motivation. And so really big challenge, especially during the pandemic, of, you know, leaving a place where you have an identity, a role, everywhere we went, from the airport to the grocery store, ran into somebody that we knew, to, you know, going someplace where I remember the first day I came home, I was so excited. I saw someone in the grocery store that I knew. And so volunteering has been a huge bridge to building relationships and starting to be part of a community, and not be isolated, you know, even during a pandemic, but start to build relationships and give back and create that network, even in a place where I'll never be a 7th generation Texan. And people here talk about that. If you are a 7th generation Texan, I'm like, well, that's not going to be my role, but I can do this.
And it is a great way to connect with people and be part of a community when you're new. And also, I imagine too, as people make transitions in their lives, you know, maybe stepping out of the workplace or stepping into new roles, that volunteering can be one of those ways to recreate community. Mm-hmm. And Rose, I'd like to hear from you too. I mean, I know that volunteering has just been part of your whole life, but what do you feel you get from it?
You know, I get a lot. I come from a sense of learning and curiosity, because one way to learn more about, like, you know, how sometimes you get so busy, your world seems very narrow. And so sometimes by volunteering, you're actually learning about what is happening in the community. And so I come from this stand of being curious. I want to learn before I want to like just say what I could do. I'm learning. And listening to different perspectives, finding skills or finding things that I'm like, I have no idea what that means, but I'm going to learn it. I'm a volunteer. I'm going to learn how to do it. And so, so for me, this sense of exploration, exploring what is out there is another way to make connections. I agree with Paula, because when I first came to Minnesota, this is, oh my goodness, 1991, 1 month before the snowstorm of Halloween, that volunteering was a way for me to kind of know what is going on. And also feel like I'm connected to Minnesota, right? Because it's a new home for me. This is totally new environment for me. I came from the South, so everything seems foreign here. Everything seems foreign here. So volunteer was become a way for me to kind of get connected, know what is going on, and really this sense of learning. And I would say for me, the volunteering too became a way for me to understand better what it is that I also want to do in life. And I tell people, that for those of you who may not know, I'm such an advocate for the teaching profession, because I am a former teacher. I've been a teacher educator, and I didn't enter education because that's something I've always wanted to do. But it was through volunteering that it really got me to understand the deep injustice that was going on in communities. And I finally decided that the calling was too loud, and that I chose education as my life's work. So it was almost a transition from volunteering, because it was like, I'm just not spending enough time with young people. I want to spend a lot more time with young people. And so that transition was totally because of the volunteer I was doing, and really observing what is needed and understanding what is going on in school, what is going on in community. So I owe that to some of the folks that I have encountered, especially a young woman who changed my trajectory of why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
You bring up such an important point, Rose, too, about just volunteering can also help us get clear on how we want to spend our time and our careers. And so for you, you had a career shift because you found your heart through volunteering. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yes, I think I've always thought, I always knew that I would be a good teacher, or I love, young people. But I think to say that I'm willing to really do this like 24/7 instead of like, okay, a few hours a week, was a big shift. And so that pivot for me, well, we call it pivot at that time, was I just say, okay, the calling got too loud. I literally feel like I needed to make that move, to the chagrin of my late mom, because she didn't understand why I left a career in engineering. But I think sometimes I told myself, I say, if I didn't try and follow my heart, I would never know. So that volunteer, kind of really, really connecting to what my heart, where my heart was and still is, really make that shift for me.
Yeah, it's how do you spend your life? And you decided that this was something so important, that calling was so important. And Paula, so you actually made a career shift as well, and then made a career in the nonprofit sector. Could you share a little bit about your story?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Kate. And mine was sort of retrospective, finding my passion. So my first career was in retail and marketing. Some of you on the call may remember Dayton's. I spent 17 wonderful years there, and came to a point where I decided I wanted to use my business skills in a mission setting. And I had no idea what that meant, but I figured out, well, if I find a mission, I need to figure out what I care about other than retail and marketing. And so I reflected back on my life and realized that I had a very powerful volunteer experience that at the time I would never have thought was going to lead to a career change. But when I was in college, I spent every Saturday afternoon at Faribault State Hospital paired with a woman who was about my same age, with developmental disabilities. And that was the only time she got off that campus the entire week, except the one night they went bowling. And it wasn't like it was really sacrificial because Carleton football wasn't a big thing on Saturday afternoons at Carleton. And but I got hooked, and for 4 years did that, and built this relationship with June. And when I thought about, well, what do I care about? What mission? That volunteer experience really spoke to me about wanting to work and support people with disabilities. And so my bridge position was to become a VP of business development at Courage Center, which was using my business skills and serving with people with disabilities, and then ended up with a 20+ year career serving people with disabilities and older adults and others over time. Would not have happened without that volunteer experience.
It was transformative for you. And Phil, you volunteered throughout your whole career. You also had volunteer roles. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like and how you carved out time to be a volunteer all those years?
Sure. Well, there's always been lots to do. Just this last Thursday, I had a group, we installed the first little free library in the community of Mound at a government-assisted housing apartment and townhome complex. And so having things that touch me and touch where I'm at really has been a driving force. Even when I was working nationally on improving accessibility of women and girls to sports, or whether it was working with Men's Shed across the country, it still comes down to hands-on, feet on the ground, actually helping people. And since I enjoy that, it's always been easy to find things to do. I'm a great believer in it takes a village. That's not it takes a city or a county, it takes a village because it starts where you live with the people around you.
Phil, I'm reminded of what Rose said about just she saw a need and just stepped in and did it. And it sounds like that's what happened with you around Men's Shed. Could you talk a little bit about, why Men's Shed, why it's needed, and why you were drawn to that mission?
Right. After I'd been retired about 1.5 years, I was looking, I'd gotten a lot of things done, but I was looking for something more to do. So, of course, in this day and age, I got on the internet and ran a Google search on activities for retired men. And the first thing that came up was something called Men's Sheds. And it was about setting up local groups of retired men to reduce social isolation and loneliness, and to help their communities and each other. And so I ended up calling someone in Ireland, and I said, hey, I'm in Minnesota. Where's my nearest Men's Shed? And they said, Dublin. So I said, well, great, let's get it started here. And so the first Men's Shed in the US was in Hopkins. There are now 20 in the US, and 5 of which are here in Minnesota. And we now have a research grant from the University of Minnesota to increase men's shedding in rural Minnesota, where there's great need for, because of suicide rates and poor health outcomes for older men compared to older women and other groups.
And how about you, Paula? I mean, just like, how have you made time for volunteering? And I know too that you're volunteering in new ways within the Dallas community.
Thanks, Kate. I've thought about it, looking in the past, and sometimes I wonder how I did have time for volunteering with working full-time plus and parenting. And the only answer I can come up with is making it a priority. It was just really important to answer those calls, whatever they were. It wasn't just that somebody asked, it was also, where my real beliefs were, where my commitments and my heart are. And now, even though I'm semi-retired, it is still about making it a priority, because there are other things you can do than, for example, today, getting up to be at a 7:30 assets committee. And it has to be a priority to make that time. Otherwise, you can sleep in or golf or whatever it is that you just find to be fun. I find, my husband said, well, how was the meeting? And I said, oh, it was so fun. We had spreadsheets and numbers and financial forecasting. And then the kids came on the speaker to do the announcements at 8 a.m. and we all got to hear that.
Well, so sometimes that mission is so compelling. I mean, even some of the drudge work feels okay to do. And that mission is so important. And Rose, I definitely heard as you were talking about education, that mission just being so compelling. But can you talk a little bit about how volunteering, how you've worked it into your life? And you've been involved with a lot of different volunteer roles as well.
Yeah. I agree with Paula. Some of it is just making the time, right? If I'm going to commit to something and I'm in the learning mode, I want to do what I can. And I oftentimes, and I'm learning as I get older, that is it sometimes better to do a few things deeply well versus being too spread out. And so that's something I'm learning as I'm getting older. But I think the idea of that, if I've committed and it's something I believe in. For example, the Dragon Festival used to be called the Asian American Festival. We started at a parking lot in Western Bank in Frogtown. And so that grew and grew. And so what is nice is that at that time, there was a need. We just had to come together and plan something. And then over the years, now I get to go be somebody walking around and go, and most people don't even know that I was kind of behind some of it, which is fine, because for me, it's like you build something and right? If you believe in it, that it will last beyond me. It will last beyond the volunteers that started. To me, that's an important point for me, that it is not about me, but it's about the work. So if the work is important and I can give that time now because I will make the time, I'll do it and know that it will last.
That's powerful. Thank you, Rose. And I also want to remind people, please put some questions in chat. We will have time to ask your questions and Julie's monitoring it. But I want to ask each of the panelists, you're all over 50. We've honored all of you as a 50 over 50 person for making contributions to the community. But what feels different about volunteering in this life stage, if anything? Rose, could we just maybe start with you? Like, what's different about being a volunteer now?
I think I'm owning. I have to say, I'm learning to own the wisdom that come from years of lived experience and working in multiple sectors, and own that, right? The first time when I was in a meeting, and one of my Asian American friends literally came up to me and say, now you're the elder, you're going to sit over here. I was like, whoa, right. Okay. It feels too soon to call me an elder. And I'm learning to embrace that, because it means something. It means that I have something to offer. It means that I have lived my life with all the adversities and all the challenges and all the opportunities and all the ways that we have all overcome it, that I feel like I'm learning to own it and be able to say, I have a lot to share and still a lot to learn, right? A lot to learn from a younger generation, but there's a lot that I could share and give. And I want to take this moment, I keep wanting to do it and I forgot, is that I think about the group in here. Many of you, I know the names, I know who you are. You could be part of this panel. You've been doing the work out there. So I really wanted to acknowledge that we have a great, amazing group of volunteers doing great work in the community. So thank you.
Well, and Rose, thank you also for reminding us that, we are all giving back in our communities in different ways and different capacities, but together we're stronger when we're all contributing. So that's just a beautiful reminder. How about you, Phil? What's specifically about this life stage? What feels different about being a volunteer in this life stage?
Yeah, one of the real benefits of being retired is having the time to invest in my volunteer activities in my community. The children are grown and out of the house, and I really do have time to get up in the morning and decide what I want to do. I also find that having experience, we've all lived at this stage in our life quite a bit. We've done a lot of things. So we have that experience. I think of it as Indigenous people having the concept of the experience and knowledge of elders and acknowledging that I trust decisions I make. Finally, I find, because it's being older, it's a little more difficult to get around. I start at my front door, and because now I have the experience to recognize the needs here in my local community, I really do start here, and I just enjoy more the individual impact each of us can have by volunteering to help our community and the people around us. So that's what I see as this time of my life.
And I love that, of just also looking with what's in your back door or your yard. I mean, that local, how can you make a difference where you live, in your community? How about you, Paula? What's different about this life stage for you, if anything?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Well, really a couple things that both Phil and Dr. Chu brought up. One is you have choices. So it really is about what you really want to do now. It's not as much about a lot of my volunteering before. I had my personal volunteering, and then I had my volunteering that was tied into my career. And now it's really what is just totally, and how can I be discerning? I do sometimes say no. I recently said no to a volunteer ask, which I hate doing it. And I've sort of made a promise to my family I won't take on anything new for another year. But some of it is just, I just really don't want to do that particular thing. It doesn't make me as excited as other things. So I think that being able to be discerning, to have the time to pick what it is you most want to do. And then I think along that lines of, being an elder, we get to a stage where there is more confidence and awareness of what our unique gifts are. So where can I make the most difference? So I don't need to weigh in on everything topic, everything that was discussed at this morning's, assets and finance meeting. But, I picked up on something that I could ask a question about and look for what is that powerful question that nobody else is bringing up, based on, experience that I didn't have even 20 years ago.
Paula, you bring up a really important point, and I think this also gets to finding that time to volunteering. But by saying yes to things, you also need to say no to things. And there's so much you could get engaged with, and so it's also recognizing that saying yes is a commitment, but it's also allows you to connect in ways that make sense for you and your skill sets and the kinds of ways you want to have an impact in a community. Yeah, so I know that with being busy, you all have found many ways to get engaged with volunteering and contributing to your community. And some of those roles have been leadership roles, which can be big roles. But I wonder, how did you get into leadership roles? And Rose, could we start with you? Just how you became a leader in some of these areas?
Oh my goodness. Sometimes you don't think you're a leader because, I don't carry around and walk around and say, I'm a leader. But I think I'm known for getting stuff done. I'm known for the passion I bring for the work that I do, whether it's volunteer or professional, that I'm very mission driven. So I think it's like what Paula said, right? If you are clear that it is something that you connect with and that you would like something to be advanced, right? Whatever that is, and you put your heart to it, then then the leadership is more because you have skills that you bring to the front, not because I choose to be a leader, therefore I go look for that, right? That's not the way I think about it. So leadership to me is more something I hope I have earned from the community, from people that I've worked with, to be deserving to be a leader. So I'm very, very more, I think of the servant leadership a lot, right? The servant leadership a lot. That at the end of the day, whatever I do, if nobody knew that I did it, but it is successful and I'm like, yay, I'm happy. I'm very happy about that, because it is about the community, it's about all of us collectively advancing something, right? Something that we believe in. So yeah, so I sometimes think I'm a very accidental leader in a lot of ways, very accidental. And yet people will tell me, well, but it's not an accident for us. But I go, well, I'm just doing it because of the work, because of the mission, because of what I believe in.
And Rose, I think that's a common feeling for a lot of people, because leadership shows up in many different ways.
Right.
And for you, maybe it's passion and getting work done, and people may see that, or they may see you as an elder with some wisdom to share. And it may take someone asking you, or reaching out to you in a way that might have you see yourself as a leader in that role. And I wonder if that fits for you.
Yeah, so I guess, one specific example is that if you were to ask me like 6 years ago, being the park and recreation commissioner in Little Canada, I would say, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that, I don't even know if I'm qualified to do it. And so it was sometimes stepping into the unknown, because somebody else say, you might be interested in that if you were interested in understanding how the city works. I go, okay. And so I step in it without knowing a thing, literally. And so sometimes you become a leader partly because of that curiosity I talk about, right? Because somebody thought that it might be of interest. And so this is the discernment that Paula talked about. There are a lot of things that, maybe I'm asked that was of interest because of my youth focus. And that's why they wanted me to try on. I say, I've never done it. I'll learn everything there is to learn, and hopefully contribute to the community of Little Canada in this case. So you're right. It's kind of like sometimes I don't seek that out, but rather the opportunity to fit where my skill set are, my interest in young people, in education, have some alignment that are surprising sometimes. It's surprising. Mm-hmm.
And I think too, one of the things about stepping into those kinds of roles is being a novice. And maybe this life stage is also a time when you can say, I don't really have to prove anything. I can just learn. Right. I can be curious. I can try things. I can, be driven by the mission and not worry about just what people think of us in the same way. I don't know if that fits for you. Being a novice,
Absolutely.
though.
Absolutely. Yes. That will be several roles I play, even with the school board. Even though I've been an educator all my life, I know nothing about being a school board. I know nothing about the election process. I know nothing about, I know, but not like personally to do it. So it was a big deal. And one of the things that I just stepped into lately is learning about like running my own like LLC. Like, I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to learn. So I think I'm at the age where volunteering for something, I'm less worried about kind of all my skill set, but rather I love the idea of being a novice, right? And then the skill set will come, because as you learn more about it, then you understand where you will fit in contributing. Yeah, thank you.
And I love that we have a lot to learn from some of our younger colleagues as well, and children and youth. So I'd like to pause here and ask Julie, do we have any questions that we would like to address from the audience for the panel?
Yes, thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. We do have one question that came through the chat from, no surprise here, a 50 over 50 honoree. So thank you, Sheila. How has your experience with volunteering contributed to intergenerational or interfaith communications and understanding? So Kate, I'll let you decide who you would like to answer that question.
So who'd like to start with that? Just raise your hand, Paula, Rose, or Phil. Phil's raising his hand. Let's start with Phil.
Yeah, I think intergenerational volunteering is really important and has been to me. I've done quite a bit of volunteering with sports and youth activities. So it's just fun to bring a perspective that young athletes may not have from other parts of their life, and to be able to share that. I know in men's sheds, we encourage cross-generational activities. So whether it's a group of guys helping Cub Scouts build their first Pinewood Derby racer, or if it's a group of folks working with Home Depot and their local school district to teach second graders how to use some simple tools and build some things out of wood. There's opportunities all the time, and people in both sides of that enjoy the interaction, and they all learn something from working with others different from themselves.
I love that. And Paula or Rose, do either of you have anything to add? Paula, I see you're unmuted. Go ahead, Paula.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Kate. And that's a great question. For me, I'm quite intentional about making sure that my whole life isn't spent with people 50 and over. I love us, but I also really want to make sure I'm spending time with people at different life stages. Being on the Carleton Alumni Council has been a fantastic experience for me, in part because of that. We have students representation on the Alumni Council going up through alumni who are really at every stage of living alumni. And with the challenges felt throughout Minnesota the last year or two, there was a very intense time on campus and for the student experience, and brought up a lot of passion around how to make the school a better place, for a more welcoming place, a place where students of every race and ethnicity can have belonging. You know, I could have read about it just in the official public relations, stuff to alumni. It is not the same as getting the unfiltered experiences from kids who are there or recent alumni, and really bringing to life and making your world bigger. As Dr. Chu said earlier, one of the biggest benefits personally to volunteerism is all of our worlds can become narrow, right? We get focused on whether it's our career, our family, our health, whatever. Being a volunteer at that time, at this time and that time on the Carleton Alumni Council, and hearing the passions and the experiences and how much has been done, but really how much more work there is to do, made headlines a much more personal thing for me, and gave me opportunities in small ways to try to be part of continuing to make positive changes.
Paula, I love that about broadening our world, and that idea of volunteering is one way to expand how we see things. And I think too often, as we age, we tend to get age segregated, and, we have echo chambers to our views. And so I think that ability to get out of those similar people who have similar views and really explore those differences is really important. Rose, do you have something to add about that intergenerational piece?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that because I'm an educator and it's my life's work, to always stay grounded in what is actually happening on the ground, right? So that I'm not like, after not being in the classroom for a while, I'm kind of like thinking about all these system level things, thinking about big ideas, but never really understand what is on the ground. I think that's one of the reasons I decided to run for the school board, is to say, how do I stay connected, not only at the policy level, but have opportunity to actually understand very deeply what is actually going on at the district level, right? What are all the things that, especially through the pandemic, I literally, after was it 3 meetings, the rest of my first year being school board was on Zoom. So this year I finally got a chance to be in community, be in schools, talk to teachers, talk to young people about what is going on. And I mentor a young man in Roseville. And I intentionally did that, intentionally become a mentor to a student so that I can get to hear his perspective of what has happened in his life. He's a high school student. I could see the up and downs of the pandemic. And so, I mean, I want to support him too, because it's been so difficult. He is one of the kids that hated virtual classroom. And so it was so difficult, and it keep me grounded, right? Grounded in the fact that these issues are real. These issues are real for a young man like him going through the pandemic, and he's feeling much better because we are now in person. And so I have never met this kid because it happened over the pandemic. And so for me, always keeping track that I'm going to have a worldview different than he does. And I want to be able to be open to hear, support him, and also learn from him. So yeah, it's a very important thing to keep in mind, kind of the intergeneration. I mean, there's a whole thing about interfaith that we can talk about, because I think I tell people that, you know, many of us live in a country where it is very Christian centric, and I'm not Christian. And so there are many conversations to be had, whether you call that volunteer or not, right? Many conversations to be had about how we can really connect with each other because of our humanity, even if we think differently about something. And so that's very important point to bring up. So thank you, Shella.
So we are coming to the end of our time here, which I think we could have gone on much more. This is a fascinating discussion. And I wonder if you could each just very, very briefly give one piece of advice to someone who's thinking about volunteering. So Rose, let's start with you since we have you here.
Okay. I would say, just do it. Just do it. It's like pick something, right? I love what Phil said. Sometimes it's so local. It might be your neighbor. It doesn't have to be a formal volunteer role. It might be that you're just giving a little bit of your time for someone else in need, or someone else who just need whatever that is, right? That could be it. Could be calling someone that maybe is living alone, or, you know, creating a small group where you're checking in. So any of that, it can be small, it could be informal, it could be formal, it could, you know, so it's up to you to just take that one step, take that first step. And I know that you'll get a lot back in doing that.
Thank you. How about you, Paula? One piece of advice.
Yeah, my one piece of advice is to do what comes naturally. And if you do what comes naturally, you will find yourself being asked or being drawn to, or raising your hand to a volunteer opportunity or role that will be great for you and for the community.
Thank you. And Phil?
Yes, I think be fearless. So many times early in life, you know, we worry about what others might say or think, or hold ourselves back. But at this age, and I think it's true of many older people, be fearless, you know, step forward and help out. You know, we just have our experience to say, who cares what others think? You know, I see a need and I'm going to help fill it.
Well, thank you all for sharing so much wisdom here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Oh my gosh, yes, we could definitely keep this conversation going. This is always the downside of event time constraints. I just have a few updates I wanted to share with folks before we wrap up for the day and get into our small group conversations for those who want to stick around. But first, I want to thank all of our speakers from today, Kathy Mcclear, Jason Hansen, Dr. Kate Schaefers, Dr. Rose Chu, Paula Hart, and Phil Johnson. I also want to take a moment to thank the teams at AARP Minnesota and Pollen for the last 5 years of being awesome and working on 50 over 50 together. It's been really fun working on this program. So special shout out to Carla Sabachnik at AARP Minnesota and on the Pollen team to Tom Loftus for always managing these events on the back end, Jerome Rankin, Melanie G.S. Walby, our editorial and design team, and our executive director, Jamie Millard. So thank you to everyone. For folks who are interested in getting into volunteering and are looking for opportunities to connect with their community, AARP has a wonderful program called Create the Good that will help match you to what's needed in the community. You can check that out at createthegood.aarp.org. We will have a couple of folks sticking around for the breakouts to talk more about that. So hang tight if you want to talk more about that. And lastly, I hope everyone will save the date for November 16th for our next virtual community event. We will have our fellow honoree, Diana Pierce, host of What's Next, in conversation with several other 50 over 50 honorees about how they continue to change the conversation around aging and make an impact in their communities. So put that on your calendar and join us if you can. So that concludes our formal program. Again, if you would like to stick around for small group conversations, we'll have some rooms for honorees to connect, or if you have additional questions for our speakers, or if you want to learn more about Create the Good. So thank you everyone for being with us today. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And for those who want to stick around, just give us a minute to see who we've got left. Thanks, everybody.